Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Shaima Al-Ghazali from Diversity Resources and Belong 365, and I'm joined by our company president, Eric Toll. We're so happy you could join us today. We're going to be continuing the conversation on DEI, and we're essentially asking what's actually happening right now in the second half of 2025. The conversation around DEI has been evolving, and I believe the headlines often miss the full story. Our goal in the session is simple. It's to give you clarity on the trends and the shifts in strategy and the steps that you can take to adjust, so you leave the session with some practical insights on your own organization. So in this session, we're going to be talking about new developments in DEI, so what's surfaced in just the past few months. Then we'll look at shifts in language and strategy, so how companies are reframing DEI in these times. And finally, we'll talk about practical steps you can use, plus also tools that can support those changes. And then we'll shift to answering your questions. But of course, feel free to share your questions throughout the chat, throughout the call. And then at the end, we'll be happy to answer them. And with that, I will pass it on to Eric.
Thank you, Shaima, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, there's a lot going on in the world, but the Japanese language, it doesn't have letters, it has characters, and the Japanese word for crisis is actually 2 characters, dangerous opportunity. So this is a great opportunity to continue the work and make it better than ever. So what's going on in 2025? Of course, the year started off with Trump's executive order banning DEI in the federal workplace and also putting funding for schools, federal contractors, et cetera, at risk, created a lot of fear. But interestingly, what's actually happened is most workplaces are staying the course. Shaima, I don't know if we have that slide from last time, but some companies have cut back their DEI spending. Most are staying the course. And actually, some are increasing their spending on inclusion. And the number of companies increasing their spending is actually higher than those that are cutting. So companies are staying the course. And because what we've discovered during the past 5 years in particular is that DEI and inclusion is incredibly good for business and the workplace, whether in the United States or worldwide. I always wonder when a company is going to come up with something called a CKO, Chief Kindness Officer. And to me, that's what DEI is, just being kind. It's being kind to your employees and being kind to your customers. Clearly good for business. All right, so what's going on specifically in recent months is DEI has been evolving, but with a stronger accountability and integration into corporate structures, and I'll explain. So public messaging may be softening. A lot of companies have said, we're dialing back this program or dialing back that. If you actually look at some of their languaging, and we covered this early in the year, a lot of big companies that said they're retreating from their efforts are actually just refocusing their efforts and changing the names thereof. What's actually happening is, so the use of the specific letters DEI, for example, is down. About half of the S&P 100 have adjusted the use of the language, DEI language, in their filings in the past year. And in fact, it's down about 68% amongst the S&P 500. However, the amount of companies having a board level oversight of their DEI efforts has increased. It's up from 72% to now 79%. So even though large leading companies are talking about it less, they're doing it more. And they're moving it up the leadership chain, because that's how important these major leading companies know DEI efforts are. Good for business. And in fact, Shai, do we have that slide by chance? It's very good. DEI efforts are remarkably good for your bottom line. They're good for, let me see one second. Good for the bottom line. good for retention, and good for productivity. Very specific benefits in each area. The amount of, I'm sorry, without my glasses, I can't see what we're looking at right now. What percentage is that we're looking at right there?
Sorry, AQ covered this is about the S&P 500.
Great. And can we take a look at the statistics, please, on how much it impacts the bottom line, productivity, and retention?
This.
Bear with us one second. So what companies are doing, though, is, again, as I mentioned earlier, they're changing their use of language. They're continuing the efforts, but they're changing the use of language. And what's really interesting, I've professionally been in the DEI arena for 31 years. I've always said diversity is diverse. There are many facets to diversity. And one thing I love about being in this business is I feel like it gives me permission to uniquely be me, and anyone around me. Everyone should uniquely be who they are. Now we're seeing this radiating up into workplaces. So instead of every company jumping on this DEI trend and having a CDO or a DEI manager, companies and workplaces are now picking languaging that reflects their unique culture and mission. So, for example, Disney has shifted its DEI oversight into something called talent strategy, because their focus is on talent. That's really important to them. Paramount has rebranded its efforts workforce culture and development. Their focus is on creative teams. Mayo Clinic, their DEI office has been rebranded Office of Belonging, because that concept of belonging really resonates with their patient-centered care. And, and one famous example of a company that allegedly dialed back its DEI efforts was Google. They had someone previously whose title was Chief Diversity Officer. Now her title is VP of Google or Belonging. So they've chosen that word. So people are continuing. They're just using different languaging that reflects their unique workplace culture and values. Shaima?
Thanks, Eric. One other shift that we're seeing is more structural. So a few years ago, DEI often meant large standalone initiatives. Think big training sessions that last a few hours, multi-day events, or major program launches. What we're seeing now is the opposite, which is integration into daily workflow. Companies are replacing one-size-fits-all trainings with micro-learnings. These are short, targeted lessons that employees can apply immediately. Middle managers are increasingly seen as the carriers of culture. So when they model inclusive leadership, things like giving credit, creating space for quieter voices, or adjusting the workspace for certain people, they become the front line of inclusion. And inclusion is also showing up in decision-making, resource allocation, even scheduling. There's a major step away from being programs on the side to practices at the core. And for employees, we believe that's a lot more powerful. You don't experience inclusion because of a program, you experience it in the day-to-day actions of your team. And the third thing that we are seeing is that impact is turning into something that's being measured. So for years, DEI critics said, how do you measure inclusion? Isn't it all soft and subjective stuff? But now the answer is that you can measure it, and companies are doing so. You can have engagement surveys that track whether employees feel respected, supported, and able to contribute. You can have participation metrics that track who's using what resources. And there's also retention, promotion rates that show whether inclusion is truly influencing career and outcomes. So when you do attach DEI to data, it moves from being just something that's nice to have to being a business science. Leaders want numbers, we know that, boards want numbers, and that shift ensures that DEI is here to stay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Shaima. And I mentioned the S&P 500 before. I don't think any of them are saying, yeah, we feel like we're profitable. No, they're running the numbers, and we're now seeing that shift with DEI efforts, more numbers focused. We get a lot of inquiries, increasing number of inquiries from our customers. Can we get specific measurements on usage and impact? And in fact, we built a tool into our Belong 365 hub that will ask employees, for example, does this tool make you feel more included in your workplace? And we got a resounding 80% of customers, 81% saying, yes, I feel more included. So that goes a long way towards proving the benefit, for example, of this tool. But I think you're going to see that radiating across any sort of inclusion efforts at workplaces nationwide and worldwide. So how do we adapt to this current environment? There are three main strategies that we're seeing companies employ, organizations and workplaces employ. Number one is to check your governance links. DEI should not just be an optional soft skill, but is it something that's formally tied to board committees, executive KPIs, key performance indicators, and leadership accountability? Is it radiating down from the top? Because again, as studies from Deloitte, Gallup, and others have proven, it radically contributes to your bottom line. And for our friends here at nonprofits and schools, et cetera, it increases productivity and employee retention. It's very expensive to find, train, and retain new talent. So that's why companies are continuing this effort, because they know how good it is for business. Also, this is super important, and this is not talked about enough. If you can tie your inclusion efforts to your bottom line, which, gosh, 80% of employees feeling more included, that's helpful. You're going to retain talent. If you can tie your inclusion efforts to your bottom line or your effectiveness as a business, it provides you legal protection. Now, definitely check with your legal counsel based on what country, what state you're in. But tying it to business outcome provides you legal protection for those efforts. So that's number one, is to check your governance links. Where is this coming from? Number two is to adapt the language, but not the values. Again, we talked earlier about 3 or 4 companies that have rebranded their efforts. They're continuing in their efforts, and in some cases, doubling down and investing even more. But they're rebranding it to something that means something specific to them, to their organizational values and culture. So the language can shift, the mission can remain the same, but the language shifts to your particular mission. And it makes a lot of sense, because again, diversity is diverse and inclusion should be diverse. What resonates specifically with your workplace? A large financial organization might be run very differently and have very different culture than, say, a small nonprofit serving the community. And then finally, it's really important to focus on daily practices. If somebody wishes to become more healthy and fit, that's not something, they don't just go to a trainer once a year. They probably do something every day. You might change your diet on a daily basis. You might exercise on a daily basis. Things that are done daily tend to be a lot more effective. And in fact, the big Harvard study on DEI programs 5 or 10 years ago, it said diversity training is only effective if you do 2 things. And one of them is to make inclusion part of the daily workplace. The other is to make inclusion, offer a lot of it as an optional effort. So make it fun. Make things that are engaging and fun. For example, our Belong 365 hub has recipes in it, because no one has ever said, I don't like food. Food is fun. It's a great way to bridge cultures and religions. So when you make your inclusion efforts enjoyable and you make it part of the daily workplace, you're going to have the greatest impact. So that segues quite nicely into, how we might be able to help you. We offer something called the Belong 365 Hub. It's a logical evolution of the diversity calendar, the belonging calendar. There are two main components to it: the calendar functionality, which is designed to help you put the inclusion into your workplace on a daily basis, and then also a ever-growing, fun, dynamic suite of learning tools. And with that, I'll turn it over to Shaima. Shaima?
Thanks, Eric. So part of the everyday work we do is basically thinking of all the things that can make employees feel engaged. And then we combine that and put it into one place. And so that's where our Belong 365 Hub comes in. And I'm showing you a preview on the screen here. This is our homepage. And you can see that, as Eric mentioned, it's divided into calendar and learning. The learning resources are part of the thing that makes it so unique. They are updated regularly, so there's information that's always new and shared. And the calendar includes all different types of events that you can think of. And it crosses over different diversity groups. It crosses over holidays and religious events, and you can even add your own events. And the learning resources are very varied. We have fun things like food and recipes, but we also have things that are engaging, like activities. And we even have a new feature called Belonging Moments, and it allows you to upload and share photos of your team so that they can feel connected, especially if they are remote or in different offices. So one of the best things about it is that how flexible it is. So we have hundreds of customers, and no two hubs are alike. You can adapt the hub to reflect your organization's own terminology and culture. You can add your events, you can upload custom learnings, you can request custom micro-learning videos, and you can also remove things that don't fit with their culture. If you don't want events, for example, on a specific topic, we can remove them for you. And we've also made it super seamless to use. The hub connects directly with the tools that your employees are already in every day. So Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, Slack, HR systems even. So your employees don't need to learn yet another platform. It shows up right where they already work. And we love what we do, and we put our hearts and souls into the content that we share. And every day we ask ourselves, is this something that I would want to read and know about? And that's how we create this content for you. And so with that, I will open it up for questions. We'd love to hear from you. Drop your questions in the chat, and we'll take as many as we can. And if we can't, we'll answer them later by email. Eric, in the meantime, if there's anything else you wanted to add, I will take a look at the questions.
Yeah, and we get a really good rate, but we use our hub for our own team internally. We're 14 people, but we are in 5 countries and have 5 different faiths. So our hub is customized for our team so that we can track, okay, today our Hindu associates have a holiday. And gosh, there was a busy day a week or two ago. There was a holiday in Canada. We have an associate in Canada. There was a Muslim holiday, a Hindu holiday, and a Catholic holiday. So even with a team of 14, there's a lot to pay attention to. And I'll tell you, our retention rate here, employee retention rate at Diversity Resources Belong 365 is pretty close to 100%, because hopefully it's because we use our hub. And with one last thing I wanted to mention, I love the quote from Oscar Wilde, which is so appropriate for anyone in inclusion, is be yourself, everybody else is taken. So for you as an organization, for you as an individual, be yourself. So what kind of fun questions do we have?
Right. Well, we actually have a comment that I would hope you address. Someone said that, the trend of companies actually just removing the DEI wording is hurtful. And I think it depends on perspective, but Eric, do you have anything to say about it?
Well, it's fear driven, right? And for better or for worse, well, for worse, Trump is the most powerful person in the world and has a lot of leverage and leeway. It's fear driven, and fear stands for false evidence appearing real. It also stands for fudge everything and run. But we are so proud and grateful that so many companies are staying the course, and we have made. It's part of the reason we launched our sister company, Belong 365. It's, for example, to help you adjust to the languaging needs. So we think companies that are actually dialing back on the efforts, they're going to retreat. Oh, we forgot to tell our favorite story of 2025, Costco versus Target. Two retailers, different retailers, but in a similar space. Within 6 to 8 weeks of the executive order, Costco very famously dialed down and said, we're going to continue DEI. Target famously dialed it back. Costco saw an increase of 5.5 million store visits in the first 6 weeks. Target saw a decrease of 7.7 million visitors in the first 6 weeks and a decline in market value of $12 billion. That was just in the first 6 weeks. Target is now struggling, and I've been trying to take a break from the news recently, but I think Shaima told me that Target's CEO is stepping down or has been fired. So Costco is doing great. And, in fact, in my partner, when she's going to place an order and she might use the verb or noun Target, I'm like, nope, we're not buying anything from Target. So I think companies that run away from this effort are going to regret it. And the business proof is there. Like, if my best friend, who actually might be on this call today, asked me for business advice, invest in DEI, do it. So, all right, we saw some lovely questions. I think there was a question. Shaima, do you want to answer the one about Canada? Can the days observed reflect Canadian and U.S. holidays?
The short answer is yes. The long answer is you can customize the calendar as you wish. We do have already a preset theme in the hub where you can have the banner images on the calendar show up as events that feature Canadian events. And of course, the calendar itself can be customized to show Canada events and other events. We have all of them available. And this goes for other countries as well.
Yeah. So, for example, Allstate, one of our customers, they have employees in Canada, Mexico, Northern Ireland, and India, and the United States. So 5 countries. And that's what their calendar reflects, is those 5 countries. Funny enough, us with 14 people, we also have employees in 5 countries. So that's what our hub reflects. Mamie asked a question about new DEI titles: culture, belonging, community. Those are some of the main buzzwords. What's really important is to choose a unique individual word so that, just in case people who are against the idea of inclusion, they don't figure out, oh, we always jokingly internally refer to purple flamingos. Let's just call our DEI program Purple Flamingos. If everyone started doing that, then the target would be on your back. So we recommend choosing something that means something to your organization. Jill asked a question about how getting senior leaders invested and engaged. So you will get a recap of this. And in the recap, Shaima, let's include those statistics and they're actually on the homepage of our Belong 365 website, belong365.com. Statistics from Gallup and Deloitte, I believe those 2 organizations, but impact on the bottom line, impact on productivity, increased retention, and each number is phenomenal. I love being kind. I love religions. I love cultures. I'm going to India for the first time in October. So excited for that. But even if somebody's not into DEI just because it feels good, it's really good for business. What other questions do we have? Natasha asked a question about any people who do not have access to computers. Yes, one of our customers, is a mining company, and most of their employees are underground. So yes, first of all, our hub, if you're referring to our hub is mobile responsive. It works great on a mobile device. It also includes every month my favorite feature of the hub, which is the month at a glance calendar. It's a visual, it's beautiful, created by our graphic designer, shows you all the key dates of the month. Your subscription includes a license to make unlimited copies of that, print copies. So that's one of many ways. And one of our customers is Amazon, 1.5 million employees, 400,000 are computers, 1.1 million are not. And a lot of the features that we've created for them are for their people who work in warehouses or on trucks, so that people who are not at workstations all day long can also benefit. Shaima,
Eric,
what else?
I'd like us to address Matea's question. She mentioned that we have a DEI council and we have a lot of momentum last year, but now feeling stagnant, hard to feel it doesn't correlate with the political climate. Do you have any recommendations on how to reignite the interest and commitment? And this is specifically for the council that is struggling, not their executive team. Attendance is down, participation is down.
Well, yeah. Costco versus Target. Diversityresources.com. Go to the insights section. There are lovely blog posts, and the Costco versus Target is a very compelling story. And there are other, Shaima and I were just talking about this theoretically before this call. There are organizations that have suffered because of dialing back their DEI efforts. For example, Target. I can't really think of a single one, with one exception, that has suffered by continuing its DEI efforts. And this was actually before the executive order this year, but when Kid Rock picked on Bud Beer for having a transgender person in one of their ads. But other than that, can't think of a single instance of an organization being punished for dialing back, for continuing its DEI efforts. So I'm not involved. We have a very wonderful creative team led by Shaima, and we have some wonderful, well-researched blog posts on our website written by journalists, not by AI. They're written by journalists, and we're all professional journalists. So I look for some more statistics there. That's very compelling in a workplace. Yeah, and here to Peter Flores saying that DEI cannot be made to disappear. Executive orders are not binding. That's exactly true. Trump is one person, and he's in office temporarily, one way or another. And this is, as Abraham Lincoln so wonderfully said, this too shall pass. What else do we got, Shaima? You're muted.
Sorry about that. Interesting question from Bethany Franklin. In your opinion, is company engagement in DEI better received from someone who is not a person of color?
Ooh, would you mind repeating that question? That's so interesting.
Is company engagement in DEI better received from someone who is not a person of color?
That's an interesting question, and hopefully I'm understanding it correctly and will answer it correctly. The component of our Belong 365 hub that is a calendar, we call it the belonging calendar. We don't call it the, hey, here are very unique people that are different from you calendar. It's the belonging calendar. And, we do have one increasing area of DEI in recent years has been a focus on veterans groups. Thank goodness, people who to serve our country for very low pay and at great risk. And it's wonderful that they're recognized as having a unique experience. So that's one area that we've been adding more and more content recognizing veterans. And that's, like LGBT, like race, like culture, like religion, that is seen as an area of diversity. But I will point out that the calendar component of our product has Polish Heritage Month, Italian Heritage Month, Irish Heritage Month, German American Heritage Day, Tartan Day, which celebrates Scottish people. So our product is inclusive. Everybody is recognized in some way, shape, or form. Would somebody not of color feel less threatened by the use of the word engagement? Probably. But here's the thing. Everybody has some sort of story in which they are different. I am a white, straight male, theoretically of Christian heritage. However, I am neurodiverse. I am recovered from a disability. I am multicultural. I speak other languages. I lived in other countries as a kid. I felt very different. And I'm PFLAG. I'm the proud father of a gay son. So I identify with at least 4 different areas. And I think every white straight male can be some area of his background he felt excluded at some point. And if we can, ask that story, when have you felt excluded? I was also socioeconomically, I was the poor kid at school, and I know what it's like to feel different. And if you can tap into that story, I think they can relate. Oh, okay. Well, I felt excluded that one time. I sure would. I feel I'm rambling and getting a little personal, but I prefer to feel included. And I think if you can tap into that story, you can bring everyone to the table and turn them into an ally. I hope some part of that answers your question.
I want to just add, thank you for the thoughtful question. I think context always matters. And in my experience, it's usually less about who delivers the message and more about how it's delivered. So when a person of color leads DEI work, their lived experience can add a lot of authenticity and relatability to the topic. At the same time, when a non-person of color leader speaks up, it can signal that inclusion is truly everyone's responsibility, not just carried by underrepresented groups. And I think the most effective approach is often to just have a mix of voices, different leaders contributing, sharing stories, and showing commitment. What really matters is that it's authentic. It connects back to the organization's value, and that it's backed by consistent action and not just words. I hope that helps. We are a bit over time, but we can answer a few quick questions.
Margie Daniels had a question on PFLAG, parents and friends of lesbians and gays. So my son is gay, so I'm part of an organization called PFLAG. It's basically an ally group, so it's wonderful.
Yeah. Do schools use our resources? Yes, they do. We have several customers that are schools, and they can even add their own educational content onto the platform, which is super useful for some of our customers.
There was one other. So Allstate has one of their initiatives that they've had for many years is something called Inclusive Conversations. And, I'd like to know more about it. We talk to Allstate frequently, but just the idea of inclusive conversations is endlessly fascinating and interesting. And one story I'm going to share. Sorry. I have a very good friend named Colin Harris. Colin is Black American. We lived in Germany together at the same time. We lived in New York at the same time. And I remember one time, this is a while ago, I'm dating myself, but we were talking about my heritage. And, my grandmother had put together a book of where my ancestors came from. And I realized, Colin, because he's Black, does not get to have that same privilege. And sorry. I said, do you know where your ancestors come from? And this was pre-DNA testing, obviously. So he didn't get to, send a blood sample in to find out where his ancestors came from. And I'm like, he was cheated and deprived of his connection to his heritage because of the history of slavery. So, that conversation was very, very enlightening to me. So anyway, sorry, Shaima, I'll turn it back over to you. I think you're muted.
I'm so sorry. I do want to circle back just a quick minute for Matea's question, because I think this might also be helpful to a lot of other people in terms of motivating the council or the people who are responsible for DEI or inclusion in your organization. One thing I'd really encourage is to just reframe the council's role. Councils often get stuck thinking they need to drive big, visible initiatives all the time. But sometimes the most impactful thing is just focusing on small, meaningful practices that connect people's daily experience. For example, they can spotlight a manager who handled the cultural observance well, or running a micro learning activity together instead of a long meeting, and this takes just like 2-3 minutes. Those quick wins really build momentum back up. And one other thing that we had mentioned was making it measurable. So councils often feel discouraged when participation dips as well, because it feels like nothing's working. But if you can track what is resonating, like which resources are being used or which events spark engagement, you can start to see where the energy actually is, and then you can double down on that. That turns the work into something a bit more scientific and less subjective. And you also mentioned that your executive team is on board, and that's gold. Just ask them to help to amplify council efforts, even if a brief acknowledgement in a leadership meeting or a short video from a senior leader can energize council members. And because, it reminds them that their work has visibility and support at the highest level. So basically, in short, think small, think measurable, and leverage your leadership. Councils they don't have, or, I say councils in your case, but it's any department that works on DEI. They don't have to carry everything. They just need to spark those points of connection, and that will, naturally ripple across the organization. I hope that helps. We are way over time, so I think we are going to cut it short here. We do have some remaining questions, but our team will definitely get back to you and try to answer your questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this has been useful to you. If you'd like to hear more about the Belong 365 Hub and how we can support you in your goals, please reach out. You can contact us at support@diversityresources.com or support@belong365.com, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much, Shaima.